living away from home for the first time. It's here she meets Chris Meyer.
Chris Meyer was my very good friend. He was just the nicest, kindest man. We decided that we wanted to be more than friends, and we started dating, and we dated for about 3 months. Chris and I were attending a party. We decided that the party wasn't very fun, so we went to go take a walk by the railroad tracks. We sat down and talked for a while. And when we got up to leave, a man comes out from behind an electrical box. He actually had a weapon on Chris. It was some sort of ice pick or screwdriver or something sharp. I guess our immediate thought was he's going to rob us. That's when we realized he wants money. We start thinking, okay, well, you could have our credit cards, you can have our ATM cards, you could have our car. Then he started tying up Chris's hands behind his back. He came over to me and he took off my belt and he tied up my hands behind my back. And that's when I start thinking, okay, this man doesn't want to rob us. I stared at him the whole time. I memorized his face. I memorized he had a tattoo on his arm. He had, I was thinking, if you have any scars, I'm going to remember your scars. I'm going to remember your face. I'm not going to forget it, because if I live through this, I will get you. The last thing that Chris said to me was, everything's going to be okay.
Four hours later, Holly Dunn is at the University of Kentucky hospital fighting for her life. She has been raped, beaten, and left for dead.
Everyone was told not to talk about Chris to me. I just said, Chris is dead, isn't he? And my dad actually is the one that I said that to, and he was like, yes, he died.
Lexington detectives visit Holly in the hospital. Although still weak and traumatized, she provides a description of her attacker. DNA from the rape is entered into a national database, but police find no match. Then, just over a year later and 1,000 miles away in Houston, Texas, 39-year-old mother of two, Dr. Claudia Benton, is asleep at home a few days before Christmas.
It appears that she was sleeping. He was able to get in. He had picked up a bronze statuette from the mantle in the living room. But he was relentless in beating her. The skull fractures themselves would have killed her. He then stabbed her 3 times in the back with a very large butcher knife.
Dr. Benton was raped as she lay dying. Her house was right next to the railroad.
A train came by, and when that train came by, I could not hear myself think. It was so loud. I said, what a perfect cover for someone to get in the house without being heard.
This time, fingerprints as well as DNA are recovered from the crime scene. The prints are a match to a career criminal, Rafael Resendez Ramirez. But detectives discover this is just one in a string of aliases. His real name is Angel Maturino Resendez, a Mexican drifter with a prior record of arrests for minor felonies stretching back more than 20 years. At this point, no one links the murder of Claudia Benton to the attack on Holly Dunn and Chris Meyer in Kentucky. But a few months later, a murder in a small railway town in Texas would send police on a nationwide manhunt.
That's when we knew that this was a person who had been killing and was going to continue to kill.
While police investigate the gruesome murder of a doctor in Houston, another mysterious murder is reported in Waymar, a small Texas town 90 miles away. The bodies of Pastor Norman Cernick and his wife Karen are found in their bedroom. They had been attacked with a sledgehammer while they slept. Karen had been sexually assaulted. Assigned to the case is Harris County Prosecutor Devin Anderson.
He watched these places. It wasn't an accident that all of these people were asleep when he attacked. He would watch them, wait for them to go to sleep, get into their house, and he would strike them before they would even wake up. I thought, we have got to catch this guy.
Norman and Karen Cernick, like Dr. Benton, lived right next to the railroad. Detectives don't think it's a coincidence. They contact other police forces searching for similar crimes and soon hear from Kentucky police. The DNA from the attack on Holly Dunn and Chris Meyer matches that from the Texas murders. This is a crucial breakthrough. With 4 murders in 2 states, the authorities realize they're dealing with a highly mobile serial killer.
That's when we knew that this was a person who had been killing and was going to continue to kill.
With matching DNA, fingerprints, and Holly Dunn's description of her attacker, police are confident Resendez is their man.
Real dangerous, very dangerous, a real violent person. We need to get him off the streets.
The FBI, Texas Rangers, and Texas State Police join forces in the hunt. They suspect Resendez is traveling from one brutal killing to the next by rail, stowing away on freight trains to escape detection.
Everybody was scared. People were seeing him everywhere.
Then, just a month after the Cernicks were found murdered, 2 people, 90 miles apart, are killed on the same day.
He kept killing people. He would not stop. And his mode of transportation, using the railroads, was brilliant because they couldn't be monitored. I mean, there's thousands of trains and millions of miles of tracks all over the United States.
Just a few days later, and 1,000 miles away in Illinois, he kills again.
We're here today to announce that Rafael Resendez Ramirez has been elevated to the FBI's 10 most wanted list.
It's now 2 years since the first murder. Authorities still have no idea where Resendez is, or even if he's still in the country. But then in June 1999, there's a dramatic breakthrough. Detectives discover Resendez has a sister in the U.S. and persuade her to try to get him to turn himself in. Incredibly, after agreeing to a deal that includes family visiting rights and access to a psychological evaluation, on July 13th, Resendez walks across a bridge linking Mexico with Texas and into custody.
The surrender was voluntary, and it's something that he did on his own, and it was also the wishes of his family.
I have never felt such relief in my entire life, and I probably never will again. Just thank God.
When Holly Dunn sees the news about her attacker's arrest, the memory comes flooding back.
I was still very scared. This really meant when he surrendered that I knew that I was going to have to face him again.
At the time of his arrest, Angel Resendez, known as the Railroad Killer, is linked to 6 murders in Texas, 2 in Illinois, and 1 in Kentucky. His arraignment in Harris County Court, Houston, Texas, is the first chance prosecutor Devin Anderson gets to see the Railroad Killer face to face.
He was shackled, his ankles and his hands. He was probably about 5'5", not a tall guy. Come on up. But his forearms were ropey, with muscles. He was really scary. He looked like a wild animal who had been caught.
Because of the strength of the forensic evidence linking Resendez to the killing of Claudia Benton, the prosecution decides to concentrate all their efforts on this one murder. If successful, it could be all they need to secure the death penalty.
Yes, sir. Can all this be done very quickly so that I can say that I'm guilty?
All right. Resendez pleads guilty to killing Dr. Benton. From now on, the trial will hinge on one question. Is Resendez evil or crazy? His defense will try to show he is legally insane. If they succeed, he'll be found not guilty by reason of insanity and committed to a state psychiatric hospital. There's a remote chance that one day he could be released.
Insanity was the logical defense because no one wants to believe that there's someone out there that will do things like that. That was the thing that worried me the most about the case, was that jurors would just throw up their hands and say, nobody in their right mind could do what he does.
A verdict of insanity and a life sentence is what the prosecution is determined to avoid.
The thing about a life sentence with Resendez would have been, he would have enjoyed it. He would have enjoyed it. I mean, he would have had pen pals. He would have given interviews if they had let him. I mean, he would have loved it. And I knew that. And he didn't deserve to live after what he did. He just didn't. He caused so much pain and so much heartache and so much terror that it just, that's what the whole focus of the trial, it had to be.
The defense lays out their case, painting a picture of a madman. Their psychiatrists say Resendez has paranoid schizophrenia resulting from head injuries, drug abuse, and a family history of mental illness. They say he has delusional perceptions of the world and believes he can cause earthquakes, floods, and explosions, and that God told him to kill his victims, whom he believed to be evil.
The defense experts based their opinion on what he told them about how he was feeling at the time of the capital murder. We, on the other hand, looked at it as what actions did he take that showed he knew what he was doing was wrong.
When it's the prosecution's turn, they must produce evidence that Resendez wasn't insane, but a cold and calculating murderer. To do this, they pick apart every detail of his crimes. They show how he used the railroad so effectively to move around and evade capture. They suggest he stole items from his victims, not to keep as bizarre trophies, but so he could sell them.
He made a living off stealing people's things and having his wife sell them in Mexico. That was his job. And then his recreation was killing the people who lived in the house.
They present evidence of his meticulous methodology, how he carefully selected his victims, sneaking up on them when they were most vulnerable. And the prosecution has one very enlightening witness.
The best piece of evidence we had for his sanity was a prisoner from Florida who spent a lot of time with him in the law library researching the issue of insanity and helping other inmates raise that issue in their cases. So to me, it was like this when the defense experts would start talking. He was a very intelligent person who worked the system and knew exactly what kinds of things to say to get that defense to work.
The prosecution rests, but have they done enough? Would the jury find Resendez guilty of murdering Dr. Benton, or not guilty by reason of insanity? After deliberating for a nail-biting 7 hours in the case of the railroad killer, the jury returns their verdict.
Mr. Resendez, would you please rise?
Guilty of murder in the first degree.
The guilty verdict was such a whew, because I thought now we can get to the real, what we really need to be here to talk about, which is what has happened to these victims, because everybody needs to know what he did.
Now the prosecution can push for the death penalty. Devin Anderson will need to provide decisive evidence to prove Resendez committed each of the murders and show the jury the full horror of all his crimes. She displays a series of brutal crime scene photographs and presents testimony from the victims' families.
Although the decision about the death penalty is supposed to be an analytical one and a cold one, I wanted them to hate him, to see what a monster he was.
If you look at all of the evidence that you've heard in this case, he knows what he's doing, and he's making the choice to do it, and he won't stop. And we're not here to say he's a sick weirdo. He is sick. There is something wrong with him. But does it make him any less morally responsible? No.
I wanted that jury to understand we have to take care of him today.
It is over. It is over.
But there's one final witness who needs to appear. 3 years after she was attacked, it's Holly Dunn's turn to testify as the only surviving victim.
I remember Devin telling me, I'm sitting in like the waiting room about to go into the courtroom.
Then I went back there and said, okay, are you ready? And she said, yep. And I said, he's going to be in there looking at you. Don't look at him, just look at me. Don't look at him until I ask you to. And she said, okay. And I gave her a hug and came back out here and called her.
When I went into the courtroom, I sat down in the chair to testify. I did not look at him. I was looking straight at Devin.
Just felt so proud of her for doing that. And she cried. I mean, she was very, emotional, but she told it, she got it out.
The jurors were crying, Devin was crying.
Now prosecutor Devin Anderson prepares to ask her final question. Everything in the trial has been building to this.
It was the moment I had been waiting for in the trial because I wanted a victim of his to face him down because no one else could.
And then they say, could you please tell us what he's wearing? And so at this moment, I knew I was going to have to look at him. So I look at him and I, point to him and I say, he's wearing a white button-down shirt. And as I'm saying that, I feel my hearing going into my head. I get really hot and I feel like I'm about to faint.
And she looked him in the eye and she identified him. And it was a great moment. It's a great moment because she got to call him out. For all those other people sitting in the courtroom and for all those other people who were dead, she got to call him out. It was great.
I saw him and he had basically an emotionless face. I was so emotionally destroyed. I mean, I couldn't give any more than I gave during that trial.
Resendez is sentenced to death. In 2006, when the last of his appeals is denied, he is executed by lethal injection. Today, Holly Dunn runs Holly's House, an organization that helps victims of violent crime.
It happened and I have to live with it for the rest of my life. But this event does not define me. How I live now is for all the victims and especially for Chris, but for all of Resendez's victims because those loved ones aren't here anymore.
I've been given a second chance, and I want to live life to the fullest.